9 Ocelotl under a death trecena, born on stolen ground. Tonight we ask, can the United States transform from predator to a guide into Mictlan? Hola, piloncillos. Welcome to the first episode of Season 2 of the Offerings of Copal podcast. This is your host, Cihua Mazatl. Tonight I am broadcasting from Kumeyaay land in what the maps call San Diego. Before anything else, we honor the original peoples of this continent, one part of the 574 plus sovereign nations the federal government now reluctantly lists. Colonialism is not a chapter closed. It is the operating system of the U.S. running on your data. Take a moment. I invite you to pause this audio and look up your location at native-land.ca and speak the nation names aloud. Today's episode is brought to you by the morning coffee conversations that I have with my partner, Itzcuautli. And we were talking about what if we pulled the Tonalamatl for the USA? And I don't know if you knew this, but you can cast or pull a Tonalamatl, what TikTok might call Aztec Astrology, for any birthday, treaty signing, company launch, and even a relationship. The phrase Aztec Astrology I have reluctantly used as it is crude and really reduces our ancestors' sacred mathematics, their astronomy, and oral story traditions into something that is more palatable and digestible. However, I did use it in the title of this episode to help get people through the door, because I think it is important that we start to look at the world and our perceptions of time through a decolonial lens. While today we will be diving into the US's Tonalamatl, I think it's important to understand, what is the Tonalamatl really? Now, this is a topic that I've covered in other episodes, but I think it's important that we sort of do a quick overview so that we're all on the same page. Now, the Tonalamatl is not a horoscope, not really, not like Aztec astrology, like the title says. It's not a superstition. The Tonalamatl is based on the Tonalpawali, which is a sacred calendrical system developed by the Nahuatl peoples, especially the Mexica and their ancestors. It weaves time, story, and sacred mathematics into a map of existence. It names the forces at play on the day that something is born, whether it's a child, an idea, or even a country. And while I do recognize that Tonalamatl, the usage or the taking out of Tonalamatls hasn't been a common practice in a long time, and it pleases me to see it slowly rising into a daily practice. But beyond it being this analysis, it's also a kind of diagnostic. A Tonalamatl is an energetic blueprint, a reminder of one's gifts, potentials, challenges, tendencies, and transformation cycles. It tells you what curriculum, and I am liking this new word, curriculum, when talking about the Tonalamatl, but it is a curriculum your soul has signed up for. For collectives, nations, movements, and agreements, it reveals the underlying script they tend to follow, or the lessons. These are overarching lessons and ideas. It's sort of just like your energetic signature. It helps us name the wound, the medicine, and the moment. And that's why it matters. It's about responsibility, about bringing what was unconscious into consciousness so we can choose how we show up. That's the value of reading a Tonalamatl, and the value of reading one for the United States. Not to excuse its behavior, but to understand the forces it rides and what healing might look like when those forces are realigned. And let's be clear, this is not the birth chart of the land itself. This land is ancient. It has its own sacred rhythm, its own Tonalamatl. What we are reading tonight is the Tonalamatl of a settler colonial concept, a political and economic entity that calls itself the United States. This chart reflects how that container moves, what animates it, and what it keeps trying to avoid. A Tonalamatl reads not who you are, but how you are called to live. It offers a curriculum, a set of sacred tensions for people, for cities, for nations. For the United States, this means tracking what animates the spirit of the Republic, its gifts, its shadows, its lessons. This is especially important now. We're watching systems fail in real time: healthcare, housing, education, governance, all crumbling under the weight of the very hierarchies they were built to uphold. Institutions designed to protect have revealed themselves as cages, as camps. The courts, the laws, the checks and balances, none of them are saving us, and maybe they were never meant to. No one is coming to save us, but we can reclaim the animating force, the tonali of this place. We can name its contradictions and choose to feed a different path forward. A path that does not depend on repeating the United States' primal sin, the genocide of indigenous peoples and the theft of their lands. A path that refuses to accept that the descendants of these civilizations are treated as strangers on their own soil. When we talk about the targeting of Mexicans, quote unquote, today, we're not talking about immigration. We are talking about indigenous people being persecuted on Anahuac land, Turtle Island land, the same land that the U.S. claimed through violence and continues to control through policy, surveillance, incarceration, and militarized borders. To reclaim the Tonalamatl is to remember this land was never lost. It remembers us. The question is whether we will remember ourselves. So, without further ado, let's dive in. I am planning to make a little glyph for everyone watching or listening. So if you are listening, you can check my Instagram at Cihua Mazatl, and you'll be able to pull up the glyph under the announcement for this episode. And if you're on YouTube, I will maybe link it. I don't know. But I will make a glyphs for you all to see the information so that you can follow along and also make your own analysis. I highly encourage learning like by hand, and taking this. If you're an astrology person, have a platform, just feel free to use it, but just credit my work. And all right, so it's interesting. All of this is really exciting because when me and my partner were having a little coffee date in the mornings, we always have our coffee date, and we were talking or discussing the Tonalamatl of the United States. We were like, let's pull it, let's check it out. So I took out all my graphs and everything, and at first glance, the United States Tonali, or day sign, came out to be Cuautli, which is the eagle. And I said, how fitting that it is an eagle. And I was just sort of stunned by it, right? So if you are paying attention to the calendrical count, which I put out daily messages for on Tonali on Instagram, for those that want to follow the calendar, that's where I put them up. But you'll notice that on July 4th, it is a Cuautli day. Now, there are technicalities when it comes to pulling out a Tonalamatl, and one of the most important aspects is making sure that you have the correct time, the time of birth for something, as that can really change things. So for a quick overview, the trecena, now if you want to take notes, the trecena is a 13-day block ruled by a patron deity or teot. And it has a specific image in the códice. Well, all of these are just images anyway. It's a pictographic language. And so there is an image associated with this 13-day block. And it matters because it represents the soul's journey or life path, or I like to call it a roadmap of life, or in this case, a soul's curriculum. All right. I know all of this is going to seem foreign, and that's okay. This is why we're diving into these things, because it's important that we learn and reclaim Tonalamatl for ourselves. And so next we have the day sign, which most people, when you think about the Tonalamats, or when people ask you what's your tonali, you're referring to your day sign. So this is where most people know. So the day sign, or the tonal, is one of 20 solar glyphs, or one of 20 day signs. And it represents your essence or your public role, how you navigate through the world. And then we also have the night lord and the day lord. And they represent planetary cycles and elemental phases. And it represents also the inner and in our outer nature. The hour sign is the energy at birth. This is your first breath. This is a more private energy. Most of the time, individuals kept this energy private because it could tell so much about you and your essence, but it represents your instincts, your gut reactions. This is the deeper, innermost self. And we also have the year sign and its number. So it's one of 52 combinations, and it is the collective tone of the era. All right, now each of the 20 day signs teaches us a lesson, and every 4 years, when speaking about the Tonalamatl for the United States, every 4 years the nation moves through a new one. Now these 4 year cycles are in reference to the Trecena. This is how my teacher taught me about the Tonalamatl and how you read Trecenas. Now others may have different interpretations, but on a Trecena, it represents a 13-day block, right? And so there are 13 glyphs on this Trecena, and those 13 glyphs represent 4 year cycles when added up equal 52 years. So this creates a repeating life cycle of 52 years, 13 signs multiplied by 4 years each. It's kind of like the rings on a tree. Every cycle reveals how the nation or people, this is, our life path, stagnates or attempts to grow. We are currently in a year 6 of cycle 6 of the United States. Okay. And maybe I'll do a visual. I feel like maybe this would have been better as a visual reading, but perhaps I'll do a follow-up. You guys let me know in the comments. For those on YouTube or wherever you're listening from, please comment and let me know if this is digestible or not, or just too confusing. But if you want me to do like a visual one, I can dive into that. But for those just listening, bear with me. I promise it'll make sense. So the United States was born on a Chiknawi Ocelotl day. That is 9 Ocelot, or 9 Jaguar. So contrary to my previous belief that I thought it was born on a Matlakli Gwautli day, due to the start time, due to the hour, which I have documented as 5:10 p.m., which I have to then look at the records and convert the time to Mexico City time and before daylight savings time. So it's a whole process. And so that ended up bringing the time to earlier time to its I think it was like 3:39. And because at the time they didn't document minutes like we document minutes now. And so it's like a whole thing. But so I was really shocked to see that it was 9 Ocelot and not 10 Cuautli. And I think this is really important because it really changes the path or trajectory, the lessons here. While Cuautli is a freedom-loving, expansive, visionary energy, and that's not to say that the United States doesn't have that, because it's still a sort of symbol associated with the United States. And so I do think that that is meaningful. But what's fascinating is that historically, our ancestors, we had two legions of warriors. We had the jaguar warriors and the eagle warriors. And so there were two different or distinct schools of thought and ways in which they navigated life. I think one is solar and one is nocturnal. Now, the ocelot is often incorrectly translated to be a tiger or a jaguar, but it is actually its own species of cat. They're literally called ocelot. And so they're sort of a smaller jaguar, like a mini jaguar. They're really beautiful and sleek and slender, and they lived on that land, and they still do, although they're very endangered. But they're beautiful. They love to rest on tree branches above water. You could often find them there. They have these like brilliant eyes. And please, I encourage you to take a moment and look one up if you've never seen one before. And they were once very abundant in Mexico. Now, if you watch a documentary on them, you'll learn that they're very cautious. They are excellent hunters that follow their prey quietly, that you would never even know that they're there. And they're very measured before their actions. To our ancestors, the spots on the ocelot's skin or on its fur look like flowers. And so they were sometimes referred to as cochimistli, which means the flowered feline. And what this represents in human beings, according to Arturo Mesa, is the realization of all that those that have the jaguar tonali, the realization of everything that they begin, it's the success. In those that have this tonali, there is a blooming. It is the attainment of all of that which you set out to do. And every success turns into a bloom on the fur of the ocelot. Interestingly, the ocelot also has a history and association of magic and Nahualismo. They, in the Maya and the Maya civilizations and the Olmec civilizations, they were often associated with the magician, the Nahuatl, the shaman, all these different words that aren't really native to our peoples, but English is a very limited language, and so pardon me if I don't use the appropriate words, because English doesn't have those words to describe some of these concepts. But they were associated with magic. They were associated with the occult, with the unseen, with our primal instincts, and also associated with the Tezcatlipoca. Now, there is all of that which we cannot see in the darkness. Our subconscious desires and instincts are also represented within the ocelot. Ocelot has both an earthly and cosmic connection. Earthly because it walks on earth, but cosmic because the spots on its back reflect the night sky. They say that those spots are all the stars in the night sky. Therefore, the ocelot, the jaguar, is also associated with the Tonalamatl and the counting of the stars. For its earthly aspects, they say that Tepeyolotli, which is represented by the jaguar, is the heart of the mountain. That you may find the ocelot in the mountain, therefore has this earthly symbolism. The courage of the mountain as well. Now let's return to the concept of the jaguar warrior. So like I said, the jaguar warrior and the eagle warriors, respectively called Ocelot Yauquisque and the Cuautli Yauquisque. And they were the most important orders, ancient Anahuac, the Yauquiscayot, as they were responsible for the well-being and the governance of the Anahuac. And so I think this is important to note. People that have jaguar energy, eagle energy, or concepts, nations, relationships, whatever, if we're looking at the bigger picture, has people that had jaguar or Cuautli often are in roles of leadership. That's not to say that the other signs can't be leaders or entrepreneurs or any of these other things. All signs have their beautiful potential, but it is important that we take a look at the historical context as well so that we may make the appropriate associations. In overview, the Ocelot is the keeper of the night and the underworld. It teaches strategic perception, the protection of sacred things, and the strength through silence. Now, each sign also has a regent. There's a Lord of Day and a Lord of Night. And for the essence of time, I can't cover them all, but I'll just mention it briefly that for the day, we have the Lord of Day is Quetzalcoatl, and the Lord of Night is Chalchitlique, and the regent is Tlazolteotl. I could honestly do full episodes on all of these energies, but I just gonna have to keep it brief because we haven't covered some of the more important aspects of the US's Tonalamatl. Now let's look at the shadow. We looked at the medicine of Jaguar, of the Ocelot. The shadow of the Jaguar is that it devours. It can become addicted to power, its secrecy, the way that it stalks, the primal energy of enjoying the hunt. You ever see a cat? I don't know if you've ever had a cat, but sometimes cats will hunt, just to kill. They play with their prey and they don't eat it. How many times did my cat bring me mice or lizards or cockroaches, giant ones, unfortunately. And they didn't eat them. They just like, here you go. And so I think it's important to look at the shadow of the Jaguar is that it can become addicted to power, the secrecy. We're looking at the symbols as a whole. Paired with the shadow signs of Quetzalcoatl and Chalchitlique, we're looking at the polluted winds and the toxic waters. We should be guardians of the wind, of the water. Imagine renewable energy using the wind, renewable energy using the water, keeping our water clear and purified is what the jaguar should be doing. It loves the water, like I mentioned before. It rests over the water, looking into it and seeing its own reflection. That's where that Descalipoca part comes in also. But it loves the water. It is a water creature, as all life is. And so in its medicine, we should be keeping that water clear and pure. But when we're not living up to our tonali, the U.S. is creating toxic waters. It manipulates narratives, stirs up fear, and destabilizes truth. Some historic examples of this is like the War on Terror, intelligence psyops, which is of particular importance, especially right now. We're looking at border surveillance, just surveillance in general, the Hollywood soft power, how we distract to entertain, the Flint water crisis, the pipelines, you name it, the cultural warfare via the media. All of these show the shadow side of the Ocelot. Now, the hour. The United States was born on an Itzcuintli hour with Mictlancihuatl as a companion. Itzcuintli is the dog. The dog is loyal, intuitive, and unafraid of death. It is the guide through the darkness and the guardian of the thresholds. This sign grants the instinct to protect sacred transitions. The dog loves to wander, but it always knows when to come home and where home is. But the dog can sometimes be aggressive. The dog can sometimes show blind loyalty. It defends authority at all costs. It can turn community into compliance and becomes the enforcer of harmful systems. There is a shadow side to everything. And some historical examples of this when looking at the United States is the police dogs, the Border Patrol canine units, ICE raids, the idea of like sicking your loyal dog on the people. And then I'm just going to mention this, but the robo dogs that could potentially be coming in the future, the militarized dogs, the Pentagon 1033 program, which allows the transfer of excess military equipment to state, local, and tribal law enforcement agencies. And finally, the militarization of public safety. What saddens me about the Itzcuintli hour is that it doesn't have to be this that we're living in right now. And it saddens me that we're not living up to our potential, which is loyal, unconditionally loving, embracing of all of community, and literally being man's best friend or human's best friend, not man, but you know what I mean? Just being the best friend. And we aren't being very good friends to the world right now. And I know that I said we, and some of you might be like, well, not me, etc. But we've all contributed and continue to contribute to this machine in some way, whether, and it's hard to make an ethical choice nowadays, but whether it's, in what it is that we buy, or how we participate in the world and its systems. And none of us are innocent to that, but we can do better. This isn't to make you feel terrible, but we do have to take accountability. Now, the year, well, we'll look at the trecena. The trecena is just so important. I mentioned it briefly before diving into its cycles, but the trecena is Se Mikisli, which is one death. I was really sort of in shock about wasn't in shock, but I guess surprised. Not even surprised. I guess confirmed, validated. I don't know how much death is within the U.S. chart. Now, death isn't a bad thing. It is the Western's perception, the Western view, the Western worldview's perception of death has that negative connotation, but not to our ancestors. Death represented deep transformation, the land of our ancestors. And it was the acceptance of change. It was the release, the freedom of life. It is the composting in order to create new life. And in our Western worldview, it's the thing that we fear. It's a thing that we fear, and so much destruction and unnecessary suffering is caused because of this fear of death that we've not truly digested. And again, I say we because the world has been dominated by the West, and this is my attempt to make it not so. So I hope that, as difficult, hopefully not difficult as this may be to sort of understand, hope that you're following along. According to our ancestors, the characteristics associated with the trecena of Semikisli, or one death, were those of rest, renewal, rejuvenation, the rest that was necessary in order to create change and transformation. It was about reflection. This trecena depicts Tonati, Texistecat, and Mestli. Tonati represents the warmth, the expansion, light, strength, and Texistecat represents the moon, sensibility, creativity, and practicality, all of which together represent the aspects needed to create a fulfilling life. Though, yes, Semikisli is death, but it's actually about life. It's about saying yes to the opportunities that life gives you before our death day comes. If we resist the medicine that this trecena offers of deep transformation, the shedding can become violent. Transformation can turn into annihilation. The system consumes life rather than renewing it. Death becomes the product. Now, some historic examples of this underlying energy is all around us, what's interesting about Mikisli, something that my elder taught me was that Mikisli is associated with abundance. Mikisli days, after we move through our Mikisli days, is associated with abundance and, the abundance of life. And so there is a big tie to economics when it comes to death. And so some of the historic examples are wartime economic booms. I don't know if anyone's read 1984, but if not, this is a perfect time to read it. But even within 1984, there's this concept of how war is a machine that makes money. And another example is the industrial sacrifice zones, Cancer Alley, essential worker deaths, with COVID, 9/11 used as a pretext for permanent war. And the current war with Iran, the ties with is ya sabes, ya sabes cómo se dice. And it's crazy, with all this surveillance and stuff going on that you can't say specific keywords or they get flagged. And so I'm possibly regretting saying the other I word. All right, so I'll leave that trecena there. We're going to come back to it when we look at the soul map. So next we have the year, which is 11 Tecpact or Mactlacli Wanse Tecpact. And the Tecpact is the flint knife. And the medicine that Tecpact brings is that clear-sightedness. It is the precision and the intellectual, the knife represents our intellect, that spark of ideas. A lot of people associate the Tecpact with obsidian. And now it sort of becomes synonymous with obsidian, but it wasn't always so. It is flint. It is that which sparks fire. It was the flint knife, not the obsidian knife. And so I'm really skeptical for those that, view Tecpact as such a negative energy when it's truly not. It represents our intelligence, our creativity, our ability to bring light into the darkness. But it is double-edged. And so what is the darkness? It is preemptive violence masquerading as order. It's the use of tools of knowledge to dominate. Data, tech, and law become weapons. This is supposed to be a tool in which we use to create life. A knife is ultimately a tool to cut grass, to cut rope, to hunt, to create our sustenance, not to kill indiscriminately. And that's how we've used it. So, historic examples, we have algorithmic policing, surveillance capitalism, budget cuts. It's how we cut now. How we bring death isn't always literal. It's also through law, through policies, which we are seeing now. Now let's go back to the trecena. Like I mentioned earlier, the trecena depicts 13 day signs, which each represent 4-year cycles that, when multiplied together, equal 52 years. Okay. Now, if the United States was born in 1776 and we divide by 52, we'll find that we are in the 6th 52-year cycle on the 6th 4-year span. Now, I want to give you an example of the last 13 4-year cycles. So from 1984 to now, and even looking at the next couple of years in the future as to what some of these potential lessons it can bring. And again, I will create an image reference for you all to follow along. So back in 1984, from 1984 to 1988 was the last time we were in a 9 Ocelotl cycle. And so during these years, we had a sort of stealth war. We had Iran, which is interesting how long we've been in conflict. We had the Iran-Contra scandal, which exposed covert arms for hostages network and proxy wars in Central America. And so this is how the United States has destabilized, quietly. And this is where that Tezcatlipoca energy is really present, how it's like the quiet trickster, the Jaguar. Remember, it's a magician. It is the smokes and mirrors. The smokes and mirrors. I really don't know where the etymology of that comes from, but I wonder if it's associated with the Scalipoca. I'm going to do my research and confirm or figure out where it comes from, because it really, the Scalipoca is the trickster. And with the stealth war, how we've covertly destabilized other countries for our own advantage is the sneaky way that Ocelotl has hunted. ACT UP also launched street-level AIDS actions, becoming night guardians for abandoned communities. So those are some of the headline snapshots that we have for 1984 to 1988. From 1988 to 1992, we had a year of 10 Cuautli, or Mactlactli Cuautli, or eagle. And so the eagle is vision, flight, projection, expansion, freedom. And it was during this time that we had the 1990s disability civil rights. We also had the Gulf War in 1991, which showcased the U.S. power blitz and the 24-hour war media. And now you can look these things up yourself for further detail. I'm not a historian. I'm just researching headlines that I thought fit with the symbolism. Now, from 1992 to 1996, we were exploring the lessons of Mactlactli Wanse Coscacuautli, which is 11 vulture. And this is about purge, rot, renewal, recycling. And during these years, NAFTA of 1993 rewired trade. There was a hollowing of industrial towns. There was the Waco siege of 1993, which militarized federal policing at home. And we also had the Oklahoma City bombing of 1995, which reveals homegrown terror backlash. That's still... Anyway, okay, so 1996 and 2000, we were going through the lessons of Mactlactli Wanome Olin, which is 12 movement, which is upheaval, movement forward, a shifting. And during these years, we had the Seattle Battle of WTO in 1999, which cracks faith in globalization, the dot-com crash, the 2000s, and the tech dreams and retirement funds. The year Y2K for sure was a big years of movement. Now, from 2000 to 2004, we were going through 13 Tekbakt, which again cuts ideas. There was definitely a big boom in the internet, but this is also when 9/11 and the U.S. Patriot Act, the /civil liberty guardrails, the Iraq invasion in 2003 unleashes a long war and mass civilian deaths. And then 2004 to 2008, we have one Mikisli, or one death. And we had Hurricane Katrina in 2005. It stripped the illusions of equal safety, as so many people were left without support. The federal failures were exposed. It's crazy how long, these systems have been showing us the issues, and we've just been blind to see. And then we had the subprime bubble in 2007. The housing market begins to rot, so it's the end of that era. And from 2008 to 2012, we're going through 2 deer, or Omemasat, 4-year cycle, which is like that sacrifice, grace, compassion, forgiveness, right? The forgiveness that came from, that housing, the first recession, the Great Recession peaks, unemployment, and then what saved it was the debt forgiveness. So that's interesting that it happened during the Masat years. We also had the Occupy Wall Street in 2011, which reframed the 99% versus the 1% inequality. We're starting to get closer. Oh my God, I feel old. In 2012 to through 2016, we were going through a Yay Tochli, or rabbit years, and this is excess, politics, the rabbit holes, and interesting, like Tekbakt cycles sometimes bring war. We have the Shelby versus Halder 2013 opens the floodgates to voter suppression laws. Standing Rock in 2016 with the water protectors that face militarized police. Now we're moving into more recent memory territory. 2016 through 2020, we have the Nahuatl years, or 4 water years. And this is, like clarity, emotions, purification, borders, life. During these years, we had the zero tolerance in 2018, which tore families apart at the border. And then, of course, we had COVID-19 and how it exposed the healthcare inequalities and the government disarray. 2020 to 2024, we had a Makwili Squinkly 4-year cycle, which is 5 dog. And this is, conditional love, loyalty, faith, all those things. And during these years, we had the January 6th Capitol attack, which tested guard dog loyalty to democratic norms. And then the 1033 militarization debate, which questioned police as protectors or predators. And we're still seeing some of the fallout of that now, and the militarization of these new dogs and government militia. In 2024 to 2028, so this is where we're currently at, and we are in a cycle of Chikwase Osomatli, which is 6 monkey. So this is, the monkey is associated with community, with sensuality, with, humor, the trickster. And those are like the positive aspects of monkey, but looking at its shadow, the monkey is also about aggression that can come through being in community spaces. It is the democracy. It is how we relate to each other and social hierarchies. And in this regard, it's also politics. It is politics, but the monkey is often associated with the trickster. The monkey can be aggressive and use social standing as a way to subjugate the people. And so right now what we're witnessing is birthright citizenship being under attack and the use of legal sleight of hand. The pipeline of armored gear keeps the clown soldier spectacle rolling. It is the making light of the suffering of others, the mockery, that all of this has become the joke, right? I'm seeing monkeys in cages. I'm seeing the experiments of others. An interesting monkey energy is often associated to our ancestors, what represented the feminine sensuality. And so when I'm thinking about the monkey, I'm also thinking about the attacks on women's rights and also our two-spirit and LGBT brethren and their rights. The Ocelotl, the monkey associated with Xochipilli, or the regent being Xochipilli. I'm also thinking about the legalization of certain drugs, mushrooms, all that. And I think this is also the domain of Ocelotl. Now we're in this energy until 2028. So we're right in the middle of the lesson of the monkey, and we're seeing its aggressive tactics. I want you to take a moment and think about all the references that you know about monkeys, El Mono, and all the documentaries you've ever watched, and think about what that means and how we can translate it to our modern life. The monkey, I'm thinking about Planet of the Apes. I'm thinking about the monkeys in cages, the experiments on monkeys. I'm thinking about the ingenuity and the creativity that the monkey has. These are great years for creativity, for sensuality, for, looking at how the world looks at us, right? This is also about our projected self-image and how we define who belongs and who doesn't. And so right now there is an attack on that. We have, it reminds me in Planet of the Apes, I remember there was like the mean monkey, and how they started to rule, and it they how they were subjugated under their rule. And so we're experiencing that also. And so I want you to, in the comments, let me know what are some associations you're thinking about Ocelotl in these 4-year cycles that you can see. Let's talk about what we're moving into. We're moving into 2028 to 2032. We're moving into our Malinali years, or Malinali cycle. And this is the grass, this is perseverance, this is strength, this is regrowth. And so I do think that with Malinali being coming, we have, that's going to really help us, give us the medicine that we need right now during our monkey years. As terrible as it may feel, keeping yourself light and connecting to the joy of love, laughter, and humor, reminding yourself of your humanity and what is worth fighting for is so important during this time. And as we move into Malinali, I think the medicine that we need will come through. All this that is being put on us, to keep us down into the ground and defeat us, will only prove that we can be like weeds. Malinali is often associated with the weed. We can be like that weed that grows back, that comes back. This could be some projections, for our Malinali years, could be we might have a debt crunch, climate displacement, could snap brittle systems. But I do think that we can turn it around, because Malinali shows us that if we persevere, that we can change things. And so I think that's something that we're moving into. I really do hope that we can turn this around, but it is going to take all of us. In 2032 to 2036, we have an 8 akat, or 8 read years, which is going to be about taking account, taking accountability, the lost spirit. And I feel like this could come back in being more strict about our policy, so that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. At least this is what I'm hoping. And then from 2036 to 2040, we are looking at another 9 Ocelot, and this is the end. That Akat year marks the end of a 52-year cycle, and we begin again in Ocelot in 2036. And we get to decide whether we're going to be the guard or the prey. I really do feel like these times are asking us if we're going to laugh at that same trick again, or rip up the contract and dance to a new beat. In realigning the tonali, in conclusion, and all of this, we have to look at what the gift of the tonali is. The gift is the ocelot, or the jaguar, as a guardian, as opposed to the wound of endless war. I think the best step forward is to support demilitarization bills and really moving toward the possibility of peace. There's some people out there that genuinely don't believe in world peace and believe that violence is an innate human quality, but I don't believe that. When looking at the Lord of Day, Quetzalcoatl's wisdom that is available to us, we can look at funding indigenous tech, the renewable energy, using technology as a tool for good, other language projects that keep these types of languages alive, as opposed to data colonial wind, which we're swiftly moving into. The Lord of Night offers us the gift of cleansing with Chalchitlique, as opposed to the wound of toxic waters. It's important that we back tribal water suits and donate to water projects. And finally, when looking at the regent, Tlazolteotl, that we learn to purge, to release all of that which has wounded us, how land theft has wounded the soul of this country, and to pay land tax to local nations and to push land back. I think it's important to ask ourselves how we're complicit in the monkey's trick. How can we become guides like the loyal Itzcuintli, guiding us through the dark without fighting justice? I know this was a long episode, and I hope if you're still here in the end, then I thank you so much for your time and your attention. And I hope that this was an interesting deep dive into the energetic qualities and projections from the lens of the Tonalpawali, and that it gave you hope for the future and insight of how we are wired as a country or concept of a country, how we're in this collective together. And if you're interested in getting a Tonalamatl for your business's inception or your relationship or whatever it may be, or your own birthday, know that you can book a Tonalamatl with me. It is a one-on-one, and I explain, with visuals, more of this information so that you can follow along. And lastly, stay tuned. Next week, I will be offering a sale. It is the 1-year anniversary birthday of Tlatoli Oracle, which was released on a Tecpact day, as Tecpact also represents the palabra or the word and creativity. And so the inception date for my book was all done purposefully and intentionally so that it could carry those energies forward. So I'm celebrating its 1-year birthday with a sale and also a giveaway. So stay tuned on my Instagram if you would like to enter into a giveaway for an opportunity to win a signed copy of my book. And yeah, and if also you're curious about using the calendar for launching your businesses or launching something that's important to you, you can always shoot me a message, or we can get together and have a conversation of how we can use the Tonalpawali to create a positive impact in your life. Tlazocamati for spiraling with me this 4th of July. Borders are recent. The Tonalamatl is timeless. May the Ocelotl guard your night, and the Osomatli teach you to love community.